Now, I think this is what really pisses people off about woke ideology, because they will try to gaslight and will say, oh, you just don't want minorities in video games. Oh, you just don't want this or that. Like something trivial. But the reality is that the arrogance of the people pushing this ideology is what causes the majority of the backlash. And the arrogance is that they think they get to speak on behalf of the gamers. Like, they will say this is what the modern audience wants, this is what the gamers want, but they refuse to be held accountable. Because when people are giving them a backlash and they're saying, no, you're being ridiculous, what is it with this garbage article, take it and shove it up your ass, they will immediately just stop any type of conversation, and they will give disabilities to the comments. So it's this level of arrogance where on one hand they speak on behalf of the community, where they do not want any feedback from the community, and when they are thinking that they are better than the community, right? Just because they work at IGN, they slave in an open office, and they're surrounded by an army of cats and they smell of cat piss, they think that they are better than other citizens. That, like, they think that, no, like, our knowledge is vastly superior than the plebs on Twitter. I swear to God, I wish I had the time machine so I could go back in a medieval society just to see how the nobility behaves compared to the peasants, just to see how arrogant the nobility is. Because I am really curious if the game journalists aren't even more arrogant than the aristocrats of old. So they're pushing this absolute garbage take of an article where it's basically like that meme where if you do not have black characters in a video game, then you are racist. Like, they know. It's like the only reason why we didn't have any black characters in this video game is because of racism. If you do have black characters in a video game, well, how do you portray them? If the black character is shooting white characters, oh, that's a portrayal of racist stereotypical depiction. You're trying to imply that this entire demographic is violent. If the black person is the victim, oh, it's racial portrayals. You're basically trying to imply that, so you're trying to create the gamers to have the mentality that they think it's okay. Like, nothing that you do is good, right? Nothing that you do is okay, so that you have to hire the grifters. You gotta hire the army of consultants, and, once you do that, all of the problems go away. Like, you can still have, like, the racist depictions in the video game, but if the consultants are there, they're kind of protecting you from criticism. It's like kind of getting a criticism shield, right? So IGN is basically livid that Resident Evil 5 took place in Africa. And of course, if it takes place in Africa and the game is about a zombie outbreak, most of the characters affected are going to be zombies. Now, when I played the game, I actually felt bad for the zombies. I mean, they were basically people that lived in abject poverty, and they were infected by this disease. And you, as the protagonist, as Chris Redfield, you gotta survive. Like, it's not a video game where it tries to make mowing down zombies to be the fun thing. It's not like Dead Island, where you're creating all of these bizarre weapons and these crazy gadgets in order to take down the zombies, and it's meant to symbolize fun. No, Resident Evil 5 is a horror survival. Like, the zombies are supposed to be scary, and part of the lore is that you get to feel bad by the people affected by the virus, and you have to stop it so it doesn't spread. And again, like, given the fact that Resident Evil takes place in so many locations, it takes place in Europe, it takes place in the United States, it takes place in Japan. At one point, it takes place in Africa. And they have a problem with that, right? Like, they don't have a problem when the game takes place in China and all the zombies are Asians because, well, it's in China. They don't have a problem when it's in America. Oh, only when it's in Africa. And again, like, this is why game companies avoid Africa like the plague, which is incredibly sad. Because there's a lot of rich history and folklore in Africa that would actually make for some proper representation and make for some actual interesting storylines. But they don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole because they are afraid of the journalists like IGN that have a hissy fit over it. So it's a lot easier to just race swap a character. It's a lot easier to just, instead of doing actual representation and actual research into folklore and mythology, we're just going to, change the character from white to black, and there we go. If anyone complains, it's a racist, right? Like, this is the low effort that it takes to be a diversity consultant nowadays. But the thing is, as you can see, most people were giving IGN the middle finger. Like the modern audience that they love so much were telling them, no, you guys are full of shit. Your article is absolute garbage. What were you thinking? And instead of like IGN to be humbled by this, to actually say, well, okay, or to at least be neutral and pretend that they don't see the criticism, they're shutting down the comments. And by the way, there were a lot of black people as well that were calling them out. So it's not like and this is a Japanese game, by the way, right? Like Resident Evil is a Japanese game, so they can't even go behind the, oh my god, this is the white supremacist. No, like this is a video game made by a Japanese company for people in Japan, but it was so successful that people from outside Japan decided to buy it, and this is why Resident Evil was popular. But it also goes, and I talked about it in the previous video, on the fact that these people are so fucking arrogant, right? Like they're going after video games that not only were popular, but they were a hallmark in the gaming industry. Like Resident Evil is similar to, I guess, like what Mozart is for classical music, right? Like what his sonatas are for classical music. It is something that everyone around the world has heard about this title. It is a title that influenced an entire genre. Like they influenced the horror survival. So to claim the hubris that you as a fart-sniffing video game journalist know better on how to create games than the actual people of old, well, it's the same situation as Sweet Baby employee claiming that he knows better than Akira Toriyama, right? And they're looking at remaking these titles, at taking IPs because they do not have the competent people to create new stuff anymore. Like they lack the creativity and they lack the imagination of the giants that came before them in order to make good franchises. So they're stealing their work, and they're saying, well, no, because their work isn't good enough, because those people, even though they created all this entertainment and even though they managed to make your childhood great, well, they were racist pieces of shit. So what we need to do is we need to remove stuff from the game to make it good. And you get to see this happening with Dungeons & Dragons, you get to see this happening with Resident Evil 4, where they're implying that the original screenwriters were sexist, misogynistic pigs, but by having sexist, misogynistic jokes, right? And the thing is, like, the community is in an uproar, because the community doesn't think that the people who made our childhood great are evil, right? So when they are removing stuff from GTA, when they are removing stuff from these video games, it's an insult to the original creator. And it's also an insult because you think that you're so arrogant that you know better on how to make a game when you're just taking the work from someone that came before you. And I think gamers are reaching the boiling point. I think they're basically saying, you know what, all these publications, they do not speak for us. They're absolute trash. And look at the impressions as well, right? Like 100,000 impressions for IGN. I think that if Asmongold goes to sleep and records himself on a stream, that will get more impressions than IGN does now. Like, all of these gaming publications are long dead. It's just time for the people who hold the shares at AA companies, because AAA is already dead, right? So, like, the AA companies need to understand, you do not need to cater to these people. They are not your audience. You do not need to listen to them. You should be more interested in how to deal with streamers, right? Like how to get Asmongold to promote your game. Because one Asmongold just making a video about your game is worth like 10 journalists. Like you can have your game plastered in Kotaku, IGN, and all of that. It won't matter. It's barely a blip on the radar now because they have lost popularity. And the only power that they have is the power that people perceive. Which is starting to go away. The more backlash they're getting, the more people are going to have the correct perception and realize, oh, these people have lost their influence. And by the way, this article is regurgitated as well, like it's recycled garbage. This used to be a controversy when the game came out, and even then when people were, you know, incredibly woke and with this ideology on board, and you would find difficult for anyone to criticize you for having a take like this, even then, people were mocking this article. And they were basically saying that, no, you're being ridiculous. But yeah, we'll see. I do think that there's going to be a change in the gaming industry. I do think that most of the AAA companies and their journalists are going to go away. Most of them are firing employees. Journalists are closing down shop. For IGN, it's going to take a little while longer because they're still one of the most respected publications, but they're already being overtaken by Twitch streamer and YouTubers. So it's going to take a little while longer. And the AA, you know, the people who make the Pal Worlds and the people that make the Helldivers, they're going to be the new AAAs in the future. Let me know what you guys think, though. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.